Welcome back to Mile High Hoops. Today we're talking about the San Antonio Spurs, and I will have to say that the AI app will not find any players on this team with any sort of confidence, and I'll leave you to decide who Gregg Popovich is in this picture. But with all that being said, like, dislike, whatever you gotta do, subscribe and comment, and let's get right into it. So we have to start with Gregg Popovich. So Gregg Popovich has coached for 27 seasons and is now the most winning coach in NBA basketball as far as just the regular season. He passed Don Nelson in wins with 1344. But he doesn't have the record for most chips. That is held by Phil Jackson. And Phil Jackson has 11 rings to Popovich's 5. But Popovich has so many other outstanding aspects of his career. He does have the record for 22 straight seasons finishing above 50% wins, which is the longest that any franchise has ever done as far as their coach goes. And I mean, he just seems to find a way to make players that aren't highly touted effective, and the way that he gets players to buy into his system and the culture of the Spurs is pretty incredible. He usually has a couple of these guys that he just really relies on that are just vets in the locker room and keep the Spurs dream and culture alive. And with this last offseason, I mean, he kind of doesn't have any of those guys. I know Tim Duncan and Ginobili have been on the bench a lot and at practices, helping keep that alive. But really, how long can it all go without one on the court or in the locker room as a player? And it's just incredible. I mean, the way that this my way or the highway mentality as far as a coach works for him. And I don't think any other coach, unless they're to the brain level and just sheer basketball knowledge that he has, would be able to succeed with something like this. I mean, we've seen coaches like Tom Thibodeau try things similar to this, and they never really have the cred or the ability to really make this happen. I mean, as far as Tom Thibodeau goes, I mean, he was just my way or the highway as far as we're going to play incredible defense, and if you can't stay on the court for 46 minutes in a game, then you just aren't NBA talent, you know. But Gregg usually finds a group of solid players that can, I mean, all buy in and cut and pass, rotate on defense when they need to be, and just buy into the fact that this is a team and it's not just me and some other guy. And I think that it's impressive, and as someone who wants to coach basketball and has coached at a very low level as far as school, and I think that's just impressive, and it's something to look up to. And I don't know if we'll see another guy quite like this. And even if some guy is coming up with a lot of wins, someone like Steve Kerr, he won't be anywhere near him. Just two different coaching styles and two different ways to go about it. Now, I do think it is important to discuss who the next coach will be. And I was really leaning towards Becky Hammon originally, until she went and coached the Sparks, I believe. I have no clue about the WNBA, but I thought she would have been a great fit for this. She kind of had been around for a good amount of time, and it seemed like she was really well respected amongst the team. But now they have Brett Brown as well, and I think he could step into that role. But, I mean, he kind of hasn't been with the team for a super long amount of time. And then there's also guys like Tim Duncan and Ginobili that have been thrown around as potential suitors for this position. And we'll definitely have to see. I think Tim would be a well-respected guy, but would he be able to keep the same level of intensity and ownership on your own personal abilities and your own mistakes that Gregg does? I don't think he could, just because, I mean, he's so much more of a relaxed, chill guy. Maybe Ginobili, but I don't know if Ginobili really wants to stick around for that sort of thing. And onto the roster, I mean, as far as the guys on the team right now, I haven't seen a lot of gameplay of a lot of these guys, but I did catch some games of Keldon Johnson. Of course, when he played the Warriors or the Bucks or something, I'd tune into that. But I mean, he's a sniper. He shot 40% from three last season. And when I did catch games, I mean, he was pretty efficient at getting to the rim as like almost a football player's body in a 6'5" small forward slash shooting guard. I mean, he just kind of could get into people's chests and just finish. And I think he could be pretty good for them. I don't know if he'll be much better than where he kind of was. He'll definitely have more touches this next season, especially without DeJounte. But without DeJounte means he has one less guy setting him up, and the best guy that was on the team by a lot is not there to set him up anymore. So he's going to have to shoulder a lot more of the burden, and we'll have to see if he can do anything with that. Now, as far as Devin Vassell goes, I haven't caught much gameplay of him either. This is not a super deep breakdown on some of these guys because these guys I haven't watched much. But he shoots the ball well. I remember him lighting it up a couple games, and he's just another thicker 6'5" small forward shooting guard that hopefully, if the Spurs coaching staff kind of stays together, they can help grow as a defender and a shooter and kind of go from there. They don't really have a path towards what they're building towards yet. And so, I mean, just creating a good 3-and-D guard would be good for them. Now, I don't want to waste too much time talking about guys that I've barely seen play. And now I'm looking at Josh Primo as well as their new rookie, Jeremy Sochan. Jeremy missed the summer league due to COVID, I believe. So there's not much out there on him other than when he played at Baylor. And so I think it'd be better to just go to the roster as a whole. And I'm looking at vets here. They've got Doug McDermott, Josh Richardson, and Jakob Pertl as kind of the guys that I would assume that they would move off of. And so Doug McDermott has a 2-year deal worth $13.75 million each year. And he's 30 years old. He shoots the ball really well. And other than that, I mean, he's pretty meh at most things. So I would assume that most teams that are competing right now, if they've got some sort of contract that they can trade off of to add him, that is, like, if he's a better player than them, they would make that deal. And for the Spurs' sake, I assume any sort of deal that just gets them out of as much money as possible would be something they would take. Maybe they can get a second rounder in there as well. But I don't assume that he'll make it through the season on the team. And then also Josh Richardson. He's got $12 million left this next season, and that is it for his contract. And he's 29. He has never really became a great shooter. In Miami, I mean, he was pretty good at creating offense. He was slowly becoming a better, like, perimeter defender, but nothing all like came together really well. And so I'd assume, I mean, this is going to be another guy that's either going to get bought out or move to a competing team. And I don't think really any like team that's like fringe good or bad would make that move. Now shifting to Jakob Pertl, he's on the last year of his deal at $9.4 million, and he is only 26, but I don't see too many reasons to keep him. They are lacking other bigs on the team, which is kind of the only issue about if they did want to move him. I mean, they have Zach Collins, but he's always hurt. And as far as it goes for Jakob, I mean, he is just a solid center for them. And if they could keep him for like around the same price point, I mean, maybe it would make sense to keep him for a little bit longer. But ideally, I think since they just want to be bad and they don't really care about how bad they are, moving him, if they could get a first-round pick or another young player, I think that would be valuable to them. But I do see some value in keeping this center on the roster that's just going to play his role, get rebounds, finish over either hand, and be a operator from the low post and the high post that can make smart decisions and kind of help be this kind of pivot point in the middle of the offense for some of these younger guys to cut off of, get screens from, and maybe even like dish it down to the low post at certain times. But either way, I think he's probably going to end up getting extended. That's just kind of the way I feel like most of these centers go on these teams, and especially since they don't really have any other bigs. But I do like the idea of trading him. And the idea of trading him really stems off of the whole Victor Wembanyama situation. It would definitely take the Spurs to get really lucky to have their hat thrown in there, especially because if they're the worst team in the league, they still have the same percentage as the next four, I believe. And so they're going to have to get lucky or strike it big on some of these other guys that are not as highly touted. But they definitely have a pretty clean slate at this point. So in these like next 2 or 3 seasons, if they don't find the guy they want, they can just move off of some of these guys, and it's not really a big deal. It's just going to set themselves back even longer. Now, I knew this one wouldn't be super interesting, but the Spurs are just planning on being as terrible as they can be. They don't really have any of these young guys yet that are super exciting, since they are just kind of just beginning this rebuild after the whole DeMar DeRozan and Kawhi things didn't work out. But they're in a clean slate spot. They've got future picks. They're not all that great, but they have their own as well, which those will be high. And so they're in a good, clean slate position where they don't have a lot of money on the books either. So I like where they're at. But as far as wins, you could say 2, and I believe you. But I think they've got enough solid guys to win a couple. So they'll be probably last in the league at like 10 or 14. But with all that being said, thanks again for listening to Mile High Hoops. This is the last episode in the Western Conference, so we'll be starting the East very shortly, and those should be much more exciting than some of these tanking teams, which we'll definitely get to some in the East, but at least there's some top-end talent to talk about again, which will be much more interesting, and we'll actually be able to get AI images of. But yeah, like or dislike, whatever you got to do, comment, subscribe, and we'll be back with the Eastern Conference. See ya.